got my helper here today. Did a little bit of work on the flap, didn't we? Didn't we? Didn't we? Okay, I've got the top cover on the flap. I put in the pieces of balsa wood underneath there so that there's no hole going down into the innards of the flap. And I also covered that up, and I'm just going to make one line right in there, and that balsa goes back a few inches there so that when that is routed out for the aileron pin that goes into the bearing that sits here, it's not going to hit on there. And then with these, I added just a little filler to make sure that's all nice and smooth. I think that gets covered with cloth anyways afterwards. One little thing that, since the flap is not flat, it's at an angle, when you clamp it, and I had to readjust a couple times, this top piece, because it is at an angle, wants to slide down over time. And it did just a bit, so I filled that with epoxy and using the System 3 glass bubbles on there. And just did a little bit of filling around there so that's all nice and smooth. This one I routed out or drilled out a little bit too wide there because this hinge is shorter than the rest. So instead of having it equal length, that last one had to be pulled in a little bit there. But that's all right. So those are all nice and coved in there. So the hinge will go on here, bolted through here. The nuts will be on this side. You can able to get at those so that you can cover this, cover the wing, and then just bolt these on afterwards without any hassle. We were wondering whether or not to enclose those. I hate to have holes all the way through into the inside. This is my modification. Otherwise, they say just route this out and it just drops right in there, and I didn't want that. So that's the solution, the easiest one that I came up with for dealing with that. Alrighty, let's get back to work. What are you doing down there? Got to do a little more pondering on the gas tank. The gas tank that comes with the kit has a hole through the middle of it that the flap torque tube will come right through here, go into that hole, and we'll have the torque tube flapper on it. The fuel tank goes all the way around that, and it has a hole in the middle of the actual fuel tank. I'm wondering if, and you have to cut out this lattice work, of course, to put the fuel tank in there. I'm wondering if I'm going to create my own. I'm not paying that amount for a fuel tank. Cutting out the lattice and only going to this point, so the torque tube will just sit in there normally. You won't have to put it through the fuel tank. And a couple different things, whether that's going to be big enough, just having a square tank right in here, you're probably looking at 3 gallons. Or do I have the gas tank coming up and then going flat and then coming up back here somewhere, so you're adding above that torque tube over to whatever point you want and then just coming up. So you've got it coming up and coming up like that and then going back. That will give you a certain amount up higher, maybe another gallon there. Or do you have the fuel tank coming up over and down, and then just connect a hose underneath there. That would be pretty easy to put in some sort of connecting tube so that the back half of the tank would drain out and then go. Or if you have the drain at this side, then it'll drain this way and come out. So a couple different options there for making your own fuel tank. Or do you cut these lattices out and these lattices out and just have a couple gallons here and then a couple gallons here, all of them in front of that torque tube. So you just have a basic small square tank here, a basic small tank here. You can just have a tube to connect the two, and then drain out naturally from that. So there's a number of different questions there about the fuel tank size if you want to go with wing tanks. So I'm going to do a little bit more research tonight maybe and find out, and those of you that know would know, how far can you go on the main fuel tank? If you double the size of that, I don't know what the fuel tank is, I thought it was 12 gallons, or maybe that's 12 altogether with the tanks. I'll have to look into that. How far do you want to travel? It's always nice to have more if you're doing something, and I do a lot, well, hopefully fly all the way down to South America someday. But even up in the mountains around here, you go out, and it's nice to have, if you're going into some remote spot, have enough fuel to get home. We're flying in the mountains around here, so there's not an airport every couple miles sort of a thing. You've got to go quite a considerable ways. And like what I do, I just land on the ranch and fly out from there. So I've got gas there, but how much further do you plan to fly around in the backcountry versus flying, on the prairies? You can find a local fuel station, you can find an airport, but once you get up in the mountains, they aren't as prevalent. That being said, my ass can only take so much flying at one time. After a couple hours, I've found that you want to stop anyways. So if you're stopping every couple hours, can you just carry a jerry can and fill up that way? So that's what I am pondering with the tanks. Let me know what you think. How far, whoever's got a Dakota Hawk. I'm thinking about going with the Aero Momentum engine on the Dakota Hawk. Usually they put in the Rotax. I don't have enough money to pay for a Rotax, but the Aero Momentum is about half the price and about the same specification, about the same horsepower, about the same weight. So I was seriously thinking about going with the Aero Momentum engine. And I like the idea that it's fuel injecting everything. It's probably going to get as good, if not better, fuel mileage than the Rotax. And since I am a car guy, I don't have any qualms about going with, it's not even an auto conversion necessarily, more a marine conversion on the Aero Momentum. So let me hear your thoughts on that one. Well, I ponder that. Don't have to make that decision anytime soon. This wing's just about ready to be hung up onto the wall so I can get the other one and just finish it off. I just have to throw in the torque tube on that one, finish off all the little things with the aileron and the flap, and it's good to go. And now that I've done one with my new bearing setup and everything, the next one should go really quickly. So that's what I'm pondering today. One other thing I was pondering along with the fuel tank, ignore this line, I drew this line in. This line is the original line for the line of the windshield. And right about here would be the gas cap. I was thinking about going with more aerodynamic and bringing the windshield out to here, get a more aerodynamic windshield, get rid of that gas cap there, and just have the wing tanks would flow directly into the tank here, and you can get rid of that gas cap and then just vent it up to the top, so you always fill from the top. That gives you a more aerodynamic windshield, but you have to fill from the top. There might be an issue with some of the venting, but I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. And I think going with that little more of an aerodynamic windshield will make relatively more less drag coefficient. So for a little bit of work here, you can improve the drag coefficient. Same thing with wheel pants with aerodynamic strut wrap on those. Those little things to make a relatively not aerodynamic airplane into a more aerodynamic airplane has a larger effect than an already aerodynamic airplane, where you're going to add little things to make an already aerodynamic airplane more aerodynamic. With a lesser aerodynamic airplane, those little things should help relatively more. So that's what I was thinking about for the windshield. Just draw that out a little bit, and then I'll have to move the gas cap, make the lower gas tank a sealed unit, and just the fuel's coming in from the wing tanks. Any thoughts on that one?